Okay, so what's up, everybody? We're back, and we're going to talk about blueprint interfaces today. So, in a lot of my previous videos, we've used interfaces to do different things. I'm just going to make a video dedicated for blueprint interfaces. So, if you've never used one or they're confusing to you, hopefully after this, you'll be able to use one to communicate and send information or do whatever you have to do. I just have this cube here from the last video, so we're just going to use that. And all that is just a actor. It's got nothing inside of it. It just has a cube mesh on it. We're going to use this so that we can communicate with it, and we're going to make it spin. I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to do a timeline so we can get the cube to spin here. Okay, so I just have this cube set up with just a simple timeline here just to set its relative rotation on the yaw. So now if I throw a begin play in here, we can test it. So now as soon as I jump in, this cube should be spinning, and it is. Okay, so that's what we're going to make happen through the interface. So now I know that all that's working. I'm just going to delete the begin play. So now what the interface is going to do is allow us to communicate from one blueprint to another. And there's a lot of different ways you can use interfaces. I'm just going to go over kind of the basic way that probably a lot of people will be using them, just for basic general communication or firing events from one blueprint to another. We need to create an interface first, and it's very simple. So we're just going to go somewhere. I'm going in my blueprints folder. I'm just going to right click, go to blueprint, and select blueprint interface. And then I'm just going to give this a name. So I'm just going to say BPI test, we'll call it. So this is our interface. So if we double click, open that up, I think this is where a lot of people get confused because they don't know if they put stuff in here, they don't know what to do. So this is very simple though. For basic communication stuff, all you have to do is just make a function in here. So as soon as I open that, it's asking me to name a function here. So because we're going to be spinning this cube, I'm just going to call this function spin cube. Okay, and I'm just going to compile and save that, and we're done in here for the interface. Let's say we want our character to do this from, say, a button press. So we'll just do a keyboard key, and I'll just do F key. So when our character presses the F key, we're going to have something happen. Okay, now we want to call that interface we just made. So this function name, that spin cube there, we're going to look for that. So if I just drag off and do spin cube, you can see how it comes up here, spin cube, and it says message. Now, this is important because when you're sending an interface from one blueprint to another, you need the one that says message. So if I click on that, you can see how it gives us a little envelope in that top right corner. That's how we know we have the message one. Now, sometimes you'll only see the one that says message. Other times you'll get one that doesn't say message. So if I just type in spin cube again here, if I turn off context sensitive right there, you can see how we have a regular spin cube. Now this is just going to be like a regular event. See, this one doesn't have that envelope in the top there. So this would only fire this event in this blueprint we're in. This isn't going to send it out of this blueprint. So that's something to just keep in mind here, because if you're trying to send information out, which majority of the time, if you're using an interface, you're trying to send something out to another blueprint, you need the one that says message, and that's the one that has that little icon on the top. So now when we press F, we're going to fire this event, but it's not going to do anything because we need a target here. So if I try and compile this, we're going to get an error because we don't have a target there. So it needs to know where to send this to. Now, you can get your target different ways. We're going to talk about a few different ways, but what I'm going to do for right now is just do a get actors with interface. It's going to output us an array. I'm just going to plug that array into there, and we're going to pick that interface we just made, which was BPI test. So again, I'm going to go over some different ways, but this is just how we're going to do it for right now. So I can compile that, save it. So now when I press F, it's going to find all the actors that are on the BPI test interface we just made, and it's going to send that interface out to them. Okay, so we can jump into our cube now. Now we have to implement this interface into this cube blueprint, and that's easy to do. We come up here to class settings, and then we have implemented interfaces right here, and it says no interface. So we can click add, and we can look for our BPI test. And then once we click that, this blueprint is going to be implementing that interface. And you'll see a new tab open up here for interfaces. So if I click that, you can see that this tab just opened now, this interface tab, and we have our spin cube function that we made. So I can double click that now, and now it adds that function to our graph. So now I can plug that in. I'm going to plug that to the play from start. And then I want this cube just to keep spinning. I'm going to grab that event and just put it on finish too. So once our cube finishes spinning, it's going to just call this and keep spinning here. None of this matters. This is just something, this is just a visual that we have that this is firing. So if this event fires here, our cube's going to spin and keep spinning. So again, this stuff doesn't matter. All we want to do is to get this node here to fire, and we're doing that from our player character. So when our player presses the F button, we're getting all actors that are implementing that interface we made, and we're sending out spin cube to them. And our cube should get that and start spinning. So let's try that out. So if I jump in and press F, you can see that the cube starts spinning. So the cube is getting that information from the player, and it's doing what we're telling it to do. So we're sending information from one blueprint to another. What's good about doing this is that we're not making a hard reference to it. We could cast to the cube and tell it to spin, but then when we cast to it, we're going to be making a hard reference to it. This is communicating with the cube without making a hard reference. Now, depending on how you use this, you can create a hard reference to it. So you do have to be careful. If I just check my player character real quick, the size map, you can see that my player character is 144 megabytes there. Now let's say I'm going to just move this up for a second. Now, when I first started, this was something that I saw a lot of people do in tutorials when they were showing how to use interfaces. They would get all actors of class and plug in the out actors there and then pick what class you want. So this would be the cube BP. Now, when we press F, we're getting all actors. So every cube that's in our level, we're going to get them, make an array, and send that spin cube out to them. So now if we go in, give that a shot, you can see I press F and the cube starts spinning. Now, how is that different from what we just did? Well, if you use get all actors of class, this is going to make a hard reference to that cube. So if I open up my first person character and go to size map, you can see that we just made a hard reference to that cube. That cube blueprint's 123 megabytes, and it's now permanently loaded into our character blueprint. So using that one node was basically the same thing as casting. So if we were going to do that, we might as well just cast at that point, and then it'll just be easier for us to get whatever information out we want. But most of the time when you're using an interface, it's because you don't want to cast. You don't want to get that hard reference. So using get all actors of class, you can use that for a target for an interface. It's not the best way of doing it. So you can use things like get all actors with interface. There's also, you can get actors with tag. Now this is going to be similar to how get all actors with interface works. We can plug this array in and we can give it a tag and say, let's say that we'll give it a tag of cube. So if I go into my cube and I search for tag, and I can give this a actor tag of cube. So now when I press F, it's going to send this out only to anybody with this tag here. So now if I go in, I press F, you can see that the cube is spinning. So there's different ways to send that out, but we do need a target. So you can get all actors with tag, you can get all actors with interface. Now the one thing to note when using either one of these is if you have a lot of actors in your game, this may not be the route you want to go, because this is going to have to loop through all of your actors to see who has the tag of cube or to see who is on the interface that you're calling. So if you have something like 500 actors, 1,000 actors in your game, you probably don't want to be looping through this, because this would probably lower frame rate a little bit while it's finding that array. Now, if you don't have a lot of actors, you know, if you're under a couple hundred actors or something, you probably won't even notice this. And there is times when maybe you don't have a target and you need to send an interface out. Depending on you, depending on your game, you can use these. Now, if you do use either one of those, that does not make a hard reference. So if we go check our size map, you can see we're 144 here. We no longer have that cube in this blueprint. So we're avoiding the hard reference by using these. So there's different ways we can do that too. So we can also use a overlap as well. So if I just use my capsule component from my player and we just do a begin overlap with it. Let me just take that up here. I'm going to disconnect this button press for a minute. We'll just disconnect all this. We have our overlap here. So let's say we want to call this spin cube from our overlap. we can plug that in and use the other actor to send that interface to. Now, my capsule is going to overlap the ground as soon as I go in. So we're going to have to do a little check here just to make sure, because I only want this to fire if I overlap the cube, say. So let's just jump into the cube real quick. We'll add a quick collision to it. And I'm going to uncheck hidden from game so we can see it. And then we'll just compile and save that. So our player should be able to pick that up. And actually, I'm going to add a tag to this component too. So this collision sphere, I'm going to look for tag and add a component tag to it. And we'll just call that cube as well. It doesn't really matter. So now coming off this, I can check this other component and do a has tag here. So there's our component has tag right there. So if we put that on now, only if our overlapping component is tagged with cube, will this branch come out of true here. So now it's not going to pick me up when I overlap into the ground. So now only when I overlap this cube's collision sphere here, we're going to send this interface out to it. So now if I go in, and I can actually duplicate this, so let's put a couple of these in. So now if I come in and I overlap this, you can see it starts that spinning. So now I only sent that interface out to this one actor in the game. So that's going to be a very efficient way of doing that. And you could essentially do the same thing from a line trace as well. So if you had a line trace by channel, you can use this out hit here and break it and then get the hit actor from it. And we could fire. Now I'm not going to set the line trace up, but you can use that hit actor for your target there. So if this was maybe like an interaction system that you were building, you could do something like this. So you can send that interface out to that hit actor there. So that would work as well, and that would only send it out to whatever that hit actor is that your line trace is hitting. Maybe you do something where you want to send it out to everybody. Maybe if you have a bunch of actors that all need to get this information, then one of these can actually work better for you. So if we were to go back into our blueprint interface we made that has our spin cube here, we can actually add inputs to it. So let's say we want to add a Boolean. We can add a Boolean to it. If we want to add a float, we can add a float value here. Now you can pass arrays into this, you can pass structures in, any variable type you can pass into here. So you can just add an input, save that, and then now if I go back to the player, you can see that we have that bool now, and we have that float. I'm just going to delete this real quick. Let's say that we had our capsule again and we did an end overlap. Right, now we could set this up the same here. We could grab all this, paste this down here, and let's say this might be for an interaction or something like that. So we could check this to be true when we overlap. We could essentially set this up so we can only interact with this cube when we're overlapping it. And then when we stop overlapping it, we can have this fire off an event inside of our cube, but do something different depending on if that's checked or not. And then we have an option to pass in whatever type of a value we want to pass in as well. So if we're trying to give it a location or give it an array or anything like that, we can pass in whatever else we want to pass in. But I'll just show this real quick. We'll do something with the bool here. So if we're overlapping this, we'll have our cube spin. And then once we leave it, we'll have our cube stop. And we'll just use that bool there. So I'll get rid of that float because we're not going to do anything with that. I did just want to show that you can add different things on there. So now if we overlap something that's tagged with cube, we're going to send this out with bool test being true. And then if we end our overlap, we're going to send that out with bool test being false. So let's go into our cube real quick. Okay, so in our cube here, we're going to do this. We're going to do a branch here, and we're going to connect this bool test up to it. So if bool test is true when this fires, then what we're going to do is, I just made a quick variable here called should spin. We're going to set should spin to be true. And then we're going to spin our cube. And then down here, we're just going to check. So we're going to do a branch here. And we're going to say if should spin is true, then we're going to refire spin cube here. If we fire our interface with bool test being false, then we're just going to shut this off. So we're going to put this to be false here. So then after it finishes, it should stop. So let's see, if we walk into this, you can see that we have our cube spinning and it's going to keep spinning. And then once we leave, the cube's going to stop spinning there. So we're sending an interface out to this cube to get it to spin, and it's going to keep spinning as long as we're in here. And then the second we back out of this overlap, we're sending that interface back out to it with that Boolean being false. And that's only going to the actor that we're overlapping. So it doesn't matter which one we go to, it's only going out to that one. And if you needed it to go to multiples, then you could use a get all actors with tag, get all actors with interface for a target instead of using a specific one. But typically, if you're sending an interface, you want it to just go to whoever you need it to go to and not necessarily everybody in your level. So there's a lot of different ways to handle this, and every situation's going to be a little bit different. That's kind of the basics of sending an interface. It's pretty easy to set one up. You can pass whatever information. So that's going to just be like a quick rundown of the basics of an interface. Typically, you want to do it without creating a hard reference and just send it to a single actor in your game to send whatever information you need to. That's going to be it for now. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.